And now we will hear from Wolf's Issue Committee, Advancing Human Rights.
Thank you, Dee. We planned this workshop session with a 5-minute introduction from me and 2 15-minute presentations, leaving about 15 minutes for discussion. So I will begin in the way of further introduction. I'm the founder and board chair of the Southern Anti-Racism Network, founded in 1999 in Durham, North Carolina, after reconnecting with Wilf by meeting the Triangle branch. I was working on a project called Challenging White Supremacy, and I had for many years thought that Wilf was a Black women's organization because I encountered Wilf in Cleveland, Ohio, with Ione Biggs and Kathleen Gathers in the late 80s. And when I got to the Triangle, all of the members of the Triangle branch informed me I was mistaken. And it was a very interesting time of the 12 years I spent working closely with the Triangle branch. By the way, the Triangle branch will turn 90 years old in 2025, founded in 1935. So when Wilf itself turns 110, the Triangle branch will turn 90. The Southern Anti-Racism Network is North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia. We have made a point to recruit members of the SARN to Wilf. So they're members of Wilf who are based in the Triangle branch, in the Southern Piedmont branch, in the Metro Atlanta branch, in the Fannie Lou Hamer branch, because the Southern Anti-Racism Network sees itself in partnership with Wilf for the transformation of society in the feminist peacemaking tradition of Wilf and SARN, founded by women who are feminists. So that's the way of introduction to let people know who I am. And I need to know who the timekeeper is. I know I haven't been speaking 5 minutes yet, but I do want to move on to our first speaker, who is Kim Poole. Kim Poole is a 30-something, a wonderful, dynamic world traveler. I recruited Kim Poole on February 16th of this year. And Kim Poole has jumped right in. She's a member of the DMV branch, being from Baltimore. She lives in Baltimore. And I'll let her use her 15 minutes as she sees fit.
I want to begin by thanking Mama Theresa for giving me this opportunity to acknowledge the way of water. What a sacred element. Water is life. Water is not just life, it is also a blueprint for the development of our movements. It is a template for how we engage with each other. And I want to begin, just like water, by permeating this space with spirit. I want to acknowledge those that are here. Thank you for bringing your water into the space. We're 70% water, our bodies. And so thank you. Together, collectively, we are that river. We are that stream. Whenever we are gathered on one accord, we are the flow. Let the floodgates open today. I want to begin by acknowledging my ancestors, those that fill this space who we cannot see, those to my left and to my right. I want to begin by acknowledging Mama Ade Olomo, Mama Ade Olomo is that embodiment of mighty water for us, for our women in our sisterhood, the She Rose Sisterhood. I want to acknowledge my sisterhood, the three sisters, the seeds as reparations that are joining me today. Jennifer Folion and Raisa Jones that are going to help me to deliver this sacred message. And thank you again for the time. Again, Miss Tina, please show the video and we'll begin.
Wonderful. Thank you.
No, we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. This is the way of water. Let the flood flow through the levees. Let it flood through the floodgates. River rise deep inside. River rise deep inside. Oh, deep rains, have your way. Water, have your way. Water, have your way. Have your way. Have your ways. Let the flood flow through the levees. Let it flood through the floodgates. River rise deep inside. River rise deep inside. Oh, deep rains, have your way. Water, have your way. Water, have your way. Have your way. Have your ways. No, we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. This is the way of water.
Wow, that was quite a bit. Thank you so much for getting us to that point. I don't know if it was Miss Tina or Miss D or just the way of water, but in the flow, we got it done and we got it shown. I have with me the sisters that you saw in the video. Today, we're going to talk about the water as a system. Water permeates. Water is a part of a system that connects us all, and it is not an independent entity. And so I would have been improper in my attempt to duplicate, in my attempt to replicate and model what water represents for us as we develop movements, had I not included the sisters of my triad. And so I want to take time and introduce very quickly corn and squash. I know you call me Kim Poole, but I'm also known as beans, AKA cool beans. And so we're going to take a moment to introduce them, and then Mama Ade Olomo embodying mighty water. We know in the African worldview that water is feminine. And so Mama Ade, she reminds us as spirit, and she allows us the opportunity to acknowledge the Yoruba tradition today. Raisa and Jennifer, Are you able to unmute and introduce yourself before I bring up the infographic?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to all of my relatives. My name is Theresa Jones. I'm an enrolled member of the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina. I have come a very long way from my homelands, the land of the dark waters, to the Pacific Northwest, and I am experiencing the waters of a new place along with my sister here.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Falayan. I'm Pueblo, Cherokee, and Aztec. I am here with Risa in Spokane, Washington, and I currently reside in Williamsburg, Virginia. I'm so happy to be here with you today.
Go ahead, Cami. You're unmuted.
Mama Ade Olomo, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Greetings, everyone. I'm Mama Ade Olomo Dansi, and I am a priestess of Oshun. Oshun represents the river, the sweet waters. And so I've been asked to come in and talk just a little bit about that. So thank you all for having me. Yes, I'm here.
All right, Risa, if you would now please read the watering system, Seeds as Reparations, to tell our guests today the story of the interconnection of the three sisters, squash, corn, and beans.
Remember to unmute.
There was a little girl in West Baltimore, Maryland, who drifted in the water, wandering lost through the ages. She wondered who she was and pondered the strengths of her bloodlines. Her dreams to sing carried her around the world, enchanting the masses, telling the stories of her people. Using the ingenuity blessed by above, she moved mountains and shifted paradigms, bringing up the bass vibrations. The beings aligned themselves with her.
There was a little girl in Hampton, Virginia, who dreamed of a different life. Her imagination carried her across the water to far-flung corners of the world, befriending all who met her. The stories she told connected minds across vast distances and brought hearts together of one accord. Taking the struggles of her ancestors, she traveled the lands and seas to learn of how she could help the world heal. The squash became her.
There was a little girl in Lumberton, North Carolina, who yearned to hear the stories told around the globe. Her heart reached out to others, creating warmth and understanding. A differing perspective, often misunderstood, that provoked thought and soothed the heart wounds. The dark waters of her homelands bore witness to the growth that propelled her across the seas and to lands previously unknown. The corn chose her.
In all these places, the water wound its way through memory and beyond. Water is the essence of life, the ebb and flow of the life stream connecting us through lifetimes untold. Water is not an element in singularity. It is a system that permeates all of life itself. Water exists in the ponds, lakes, rivers, and streams that draw the maps of the lands and serve as guidelines.
Water fills the seas that blanket the world in unfathomable expanses that stretch farther than the eye can contain. Within the earth we walk upon, water is nurturing life beneath the ground and providing our sustenance. The air we breathe is tempered by water that moves above and around us. The water system circulates so that all life may be provided for, and the world is kept in balance. It is everything together all at once.
The ancients knew that this system that carried us along was too much for one alone. It took three sisters working together to ensure the continuity of whole communities. Not all experiences in all places were universal, but where the three sisters met together, they thrived. The corn, beans, and squash were brought together for their natural talents that supported each other.
Corn was a structure, a brain that provided direction in order for imagination to be fostered. Her lofty stalks bring up others around her to the sun. Beans provided the fertilizer, inspiration guided by spirit that wove networks of connection. She allowed others around her to work together to become their better selves. Squash moved lively across the ground, protecting that sacred space of life and binding the nourishing life water. She provided soothing warmth that kept safe the roots that bring about the future. Thank you.
Ashe, Ashe. It is the triad that reminds us that we are stronger together, not just as a metaphor, not a statement, but an implementation, something that we implement in real time, and we embody the seed of the bean, the seed of the corn, the seed of the squash, and we, with intention, cross-pollinate for our survival. The beans as fertilizer, creating an atmosphere, supporting the growth of squash and corn. The corn as a stalk that provides structure and leadership and direction, encouraging us to grow towards the sun. And the squash that protects us fiercely, protects our roots as she grows out, that keeps that water locked in to maintain the moisture and the warmth that is the necessity of our movements. How they grow. We must learn from the nature around us, see what it's teaching us, and use those lessons as we develop, cultivate, and shape our movements. This is called biomimicry. Our ancestors knew this well. They understood to give thanks to the trees for standing tall. They understood the importance, the way of water is how we move, how we connect, permeating, filling the space that's given. And the African spirit is feminine. The indigenous water spirit is feminine. The water is woman. It is us. We carry in our wombs, when we cultivate life, 9 months, the water, embryonic fluid, the pH of the embryonic fluid is the same pH of the sea. We are a map. Our body is a map of the universe. We are made of the soil, and yet we disconnect from it. If we go back to our source, we will find our methodology for movement building. We are the pedagogy. We are the force that will instruct, going back to the mother of the universe. Today we have Mama Ade Olomo. Mama Ade Olomo, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Mama Ade, please tell us about Mother Spirit of the Yoruba Nation.
Okay, I am a priestess of Oshun, and Oshun represents sweet water. Also we have Yemoja. Yemoja is the ocean. So water in its totality, the sweet water and the salt water coming together. And one of my names is Iburemi, which means between the two waters is where I get my blessings. And so water, nothing exists without water. I'll tell you a story real quick, a Yoruba story about Oshun. When the forces came to Earth to begin to start all of the production of Earth, all of these male energies came, and there was one female energy, and that was Oshun, and she was the youngest. And they came to Earth, and they started making man and filling the land and having the animals and starting life on Earth, and things were going really, really well, and the trees were blossoming, and the animals and the children were being born, and Oshun kept wanting to help to stimulate things and help things to grow. And they kept putting Oshun on the back burner. They said, you're cute. Go sit down somewhere and let us, this male energy, just handle business. And Oshun was offended. And keeping in mind that she is sweet water, keeping in mind that Oshun is the joie de vivre, the joy of life. And so they kept putting her aside. So she said, okay, I'll go and sit aside. And when she did that, when they took the sweet water away, none of the children were born. None of the crops grew. They couldn't cook. The rain stopped. The animals started dying off. And so the male energy went back up to heaven. And they said, what is wrong? We've done everything we could. We worked so hard and things were going well. And now nothing is growing. Nothing is living. Everything is falling. Why? And God said, where's Oshun? And we said, well, we didn't invite her. And God said, you need to go back and you need to invite Oshun. You need to make restitution with Oshun. And so they came back and they apologized to Oshun and they asked her forgiveness and the water began to flow. So the crops began to flourish and blossom, and the children were being born, and the land began to flourish because water is so important to every aspect of our being, the salt and the sweet. The amniotic fluid that surrounds the baby in vitro is the same pH balance as the ocean. And Yemonja is called the mother of fishes. And so even in vitro, when the baby is born, the embryo is replicates a fish. And so the sweet and the salt water is so very important. Water, I can stop or I can go on.
No, you do need to stop. Yeah.
We do have time constraints, but we understand the power of the African spirit, and we understand her embodiment as water. And what we learned from your story is that we need to ask forgiveness from the water. As we embody, as we attempt to employ biomimicry, it is time for forgiveness. That is the repairing. Water is teaching us.
Thank you, Kim. I had marked your start time at about 3:15 when the video started. So I believe we're right at about 3:30. I'm not sure. Well, we're at 3:32 actually. And I did hear
thank you so much for the time.
Well, thank you. It was beautiful to help us understand we are water. Water is life, and we are water. Our bodies hold the water to bring life. Just reminding of when your water breaks. If you have been a mother, and if you have had a child, or if you have tried to have a child, when your water breaks and you know you're ready to bring forth life. This was so beautiful, Kim Poole, Ashe, Ashe. And I did hear from Maureen. She's having trouble getting in. So what we want to do now is open up the discussion because I'm sure there is much to say. And we do want to keep comments and questions to 2 minutes. And as Kim and her guest speakers respond based on Kim's direction, we're asking them to also keep their comments to 2 minutes. And we do need the timekeeper to function. So when someone has been talking for 1 minute, I don't remember who the timekeeper is. I know Tina Shelton is an excellent timekeeper. So 2 minutes. And then Tara is trying to get back in. So I for some reason, I'm able to let people in and out. Could we
Sorry,
see?
yes, I was trying to help Maureen get in. That's why I messed up my timekeeping, but we're right on time. So yes. So is there someone raising their hands for a question?
No, Tina, I am the moderator
said.
and facilitator. Okay. So you just keep time.
I'll keep time.
I am the facilitator. Were you able to let Maureen in?
I gave her my link, and hopefully she'll make it in. We'll see.
We'll do questions.
Here. Oh, she's here.
Oh, wonderful.
I'm here. Yes.
Well, Maureen.
Yes.
Maureen, we've lost a little time. So it's your time to speak. Can you abbreviate your time to 10 minutes?
Yes.
Well, go right ahead, because we want to hear about Michigan and how water is going in Michigan.
All right. My name is Maureen Taylor. I'm state chair at Michigan Welfare Rights. Can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excellent.
Let me start by apologizing. I'm not the brightest, what do you call it, computer genius, but they're, running late and then just getting here now. Not a problem with all of these connections, but I want to warn my sisters and brothers that may be on this call. Too many steps to get on. It's just too much. And those of us that are not as smart as others, it's just too difficult to go to A, then click on B, then turn your shoe left 3 times and turn around and click your heels. Too much. Let's simplify the method. All right. Back in February or March of 2014, I started to get information at the Welfare Rights Office indicating that there was something going on with water and water shutoffs. What that meant was, and what they were trying to explain was, is that the water department was starting and really upgrading, that's what they called it, water shutoffs in the city of Detroit. They told me, and people were calling me, we're usually getting 5 or 6 inquiries a day. We started to get upwards of 15 to 20 inquiries every day, every single day. And almost all of them were about concerns with people's water being cut off. Lights and gas always an issue, but water shutoffs started to be the issue. So I made a few calls, from other members of Welfare Rights. We made a few calls and ended up in a meeting with a city of Detroit employee. And that employee told us and showed a list of 59,990 names, addresses, zip codes on a list, which were people who were at least $150 behind in terms of arrearages on water bills, or 3 months behind in payments. Of course, Welfare Rights went to work. We found all of the grassroots organizations that we could, put the circular out, the message out. There's something really bad going on, and we have to do what we have to do to stop all this. Fast forward, it ended up being about 149,000 water shutoffs in just the city of Detroit over a period of about 18 months. And we could not stop them. We went to court. We picketed. We had demonstrations. We finally ended up training a group of people who learned how to restore water that had been shut off. So it just wasn't anything else that we could do. It was called an illegal motion. Not illegal if you're a mom or a dad with minor kids, a senior, somebody disabled, veterans. You have to have water in order to live. So it took us the longest time, 18 months, to stop this bad behavior. Then it took us more time to go and make the water department restore water to everyone. And by then, 149,000 households had been cut off. Some had been able to raise the money that they needed to restore water. But it was, sisters and brothers, it was a freaking nightmare for several months. Finally, after a series of water court cases, that's what we call them, and we brought in the United Nations. We contacted the Pope. We contacted everybody we thought we could, and the United Nations came to Detroit. The Pope wrote welfare rights and invited some of us to Rome. And we took that invitation to heart, and we went there and talked about, water is life, which is the name of this a workshop right here, this conversation. And it is. I'll end by saying this. There's something immoral. There's something immoral about American corporate interests, municipal interests, that think or believe that if you are low income and poor and you cannot pay for water, or you cannot pay for lights or gas, or you cannot pay for housing, that they have the right and the authorization to cut it off, kick you out of your home. There is no such right. And under this bastard system of capitalism that is always about profits, that's what our fight always is. You don't have the right to torture people, water department. You don't have the right to take people's children out of the household and condemn the house because we couldn't pay for our water. I'm Maureen Taylor, State Chair of Michigan Welfare Rights. Sorry to have to abbreviate my comments, but I think you all know what the devil is going on here. And I'll go back on mute.
Well, thank you, Maureen, aka Tina Shelton. Maureen, we must hear an update on Flint. We watched that horror. What is happening now with Flint? If you could take 2 or 3 minutes to update us on Flint, Michigan. Remind everybody what was done to the people of Flint and tell us where matters stand now.
All right. Again, a lot of this started, almost all of this started in 2014. That's when we started to get notifications about mass water shutoffs that were going on in Detroit. All right. The other thing that was happening is that Welfare Rights has members. Okay. We have members in Flint. And our membership in Flint started to call and tell us that there was something bad going on in Flint. Well, what was that? And we finally got the information that the governor at that time, Snyder, no good son of a gun, was getting written messages, email messages from General Motors saying, "Dear Mr. Governor, we suggest you not change over your public water access system to the Flint River." And the reason we're saying don't do that is because we're using Flint water to clean our parks at General Motors. And after a few months, what we have discovered, Mr. Governor, is that the water in the Flint River had started to corrode the metal parts that we were using. And so we suggest very strongly you go back to using Detroit clean water and don't use Flint water anymore, which he ignored. So what started to happen is that water was being consumed by individuals, by children, by grandparents. It was a mess. We figured it out after we got the information. So Welfare Rights and so many others, Greg Mathis, a lot of people, start taking water to Flint. And one of the occasions that I went taking just U-Hauls full of cases of water and delivering them door by door. One of the examples that I found is that I knocked on someone's door. put the case of water there, started to walk away. Homeowner came to the door and said, "Oh, you can come in." And no, I don't want to come in because you've got a great big dog feeding utensil on your porch. So I know you got a really big dog. And that's when the homeowner told me not to worry because in Flint, they had no pets. I asked, "What are you talking about?"
One more minute.
Okay, the pets, the dogs, the cats, the gerbils, the hamsters had all started to drink the water and they all died. Where we are in Flint now is that all of the court cases that we filed, that were filed in Flint, the Justice Department failed us and said, you know, we don't have enough information to go forward. And so what we're doing now is just applying Band-Aids as best as we can. The city of Flint is still undergoing changes in water lines, but we're nowhere near that. It's a freaking nightmare in Flint. I'll go back on mute.
Thank you, Maureen. If you could use the reaction button to raise your hands if you would like to speak or ask a question. Maureen Taylor is in Detroit. She knows Laura Dewey and she knows about Will, but she is not yet a member. And if Laura Dewey doesn't mind, I'm inviting Maureen to join the Detroit branch because as part of our efforts in the Advancing Human Rights Committee, we concentrate on community organizing. And Maureen Taylor is community organizer extraordinaire. And I have known her for many decades, many decades. I still think back to founding the Labor Party in 1996 in Cleveland, Ohio, when Maureen and I worked together at that important meeting. So please raise your hands. I can't see all the hands.
Judy Adams.
There are 3.
Judy Adams has a question.
Okay, Judy Adams, please. 2 minutes or less. Thank you.
Yes, this is a comment, a very interesting program, first of all, showing the African traditions of water, and then bringing it home to the terrible situation of our municipal water supplies that have been poisoning people, as you said. I have forgotten your last name, the last speaker. It shows how much we need to work on municipalities and the federal government to assure the flow of healthful water. And
thank you, Judy.
And our oceans are being polluted in the same way by corporations, not the automobile industry. So this is great putting together of two views of the preciousness of water, its relationship down to the water breaking when you give birth, which for all women here is probably polluted with plastics and all other things that we get from drinking bottled water. So it's a really powerful and creative presentation on the importance of protecting the mother water. Thank you. It's good.
And thank you, Judy. I do know that the Advancing Human Rights Committee understands the right to water as a human right, as Maureen indicated, and as Kim has indicated, it is a human right. And so Raisa, is it Raisa Jones, our sister from the indigenous nation of the Lumbee? I lived in North Carolina, and the fighting Lumbee who would not be oppressed and would not be, I remember the Lumbee in North Carolina. So did you have something to say? I saw your hand earlier.
Yes, we just wanted to speak really briefly to explain what we were trying to get across with the Three Sisters model. I was living in Baltimore at the time, and I had met Raisa down in North Carolina at a genealogy symposium. And then shortly after, had the privilege to meet Kim Poole. And Kim Poole is a force of nature. She truly is the embodiment of the beings and nurturing and cultivating different talent. And Kim Poole invited me to be a keynote speaker in South Africa in 2021. And I, at the time, had a program, Spread Your Wings, The Courage to Fly, which focused on healing through art, music, dance, and exploring the stages of the butterfly. And so not only did I just take that trip solo, I had this wild idea that I would recruit Indigenous arts leaders to come with me. And I recruited Raisa and a number of other people that you saw in the video. And we had Turtle Island to South Africa. So a lot of those clips were us traveling to South Africa and working with the kids in high school and women in domestic violence shelters, ideas around the medicine wheel and ribbon skirt teachings. And we bought beautiful African fabric and then did the ribbon skirt teachings. And by the end of the workshops, we were all hugging and crying and loving on each other. And it was during South Africa that we bore and birthed the idea of stolen land, stolen people, that we think it's important to highlight our shared cultures and histories through African and Native American histories. And so over the past couple of years, we've been doing workshops as well about stolen land, stolen people, and art and agriculture. And those are some of the things that we'll continue to do this year. We're planning a conference in October, and we'll also be traveling to Ethiopia. And we just wanted to highlight that is the true intersectionality of art and advocacy. And we would talk about water and how we can get across these ideas through the arts for our own advocacy, especially, and we really appreciate your organization and what you're doing.
Yes, it came across beautifully and clearly. So if we could identify Eileen Kurkowski, who has a question, a member from Boston.
Yeah, thank you for all your wonderful work. When I was doing my research for my presentation for yesterday on bottled water versus municipal, I was really upset because it indicated in the two resources that I came across that Flint had very little problem. There's misinformation in official reports that has to be corrected. And that's the area that I would go after because I know a little bit more about it. It's sickening. It's absolutely disgusting. But I am so glad there are people like you, Tina Sheldon, Miss Taylor, around because we need go-getters. Thank you.
And thank you. I just want to tell a quick story. When I lived in Providence, Pawtucket, Rhode Island, Rhode Island is a mobbed up state. The mafia may do business in New York, but they live in Rhode Island. And someone connected with the mob was given the job of being in charge of the water system, water and sewer in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. Well, the feces got mixed up in the water, and for weeks, we were going to the fire department with the National Guard giving us gallons upon gallons of water because we couldn't bathe in it. We couldn't, of course, drink it. So water is life. And if you don't pay attention to what is being done in your municipal areas as it relates to water, in Atlanta, they allow companies to dump anything in the water supply. They just need to tell the Atlanta water and sewer people what they dump. And then the Atlanta water entities put the right chemicals in to kill what was dumped. That is how our water supply is being compromised. So do investigate wherever you live on how your water is treated, because you may be in unsafe territory. Are there any hands up?
My hand is not up, but can I make a 90-second statement?
Go right ahead, sister, because we do want to give Kim Poole a time for closing remarks of a couple of minutes, because I think we're about at time. So
and
please,
Laura
Sister Maureen, please.
Laura also has her hand up.
Okay, I'll be very quick. I just want folks to know that there's something that was discovered in the Detroit area that's called family toileting, okay? And get yourself prepared. It is ugly. All right, what happens if mom or aunt pop in the house, they've got 3 kids. The little one is 3 or 4 years old. And mom says, do you need to go to the bathroom? And that's because the water's been shut off already. And the little one says, yes, I have to go to the bathroom. They go there, take the baby to the bathroom, but don't let the baby flush the toilet. All right, and here comes the 7 or 8 year old. You have to go to the bathroom? No. Well, you go to the bathroom anyway. And that one has to go in the bathroom and use the same toilet as the 3-year-old did. All right, but that one can't flush. And then here's the 11 or 12-year-old. You go in there and go to the bathroom as well. And that's the 3rd one. And then mom and then pop. Everybody has to go one time. And at the end of this parade of madness, then the toilet is flushed one time. This is what goes on in Detroit. And I'll end by singing James Brown's song, my favorite. Welcome to America. It's called Family Toileting. I'll go back on mute.
And interestingly enough, I have heard that story before in other places as a way of preserving water. Only flush it once. Don't flush it if you just urinate. Don't flush it. Just flush it when you really need to flush it. That's how bad life is. Madam Conference Coordinator, how much time do we have left in this session? Because I do see Cricket's hand. Do we have time?
We have
Cricket and then for Kim Poole.
We have 4 minutes left.
4 minutes.
Okay, if you could, Cricket, keep your comment or question to 1 minute, that would be great. We do want to hear from Kim Poole's closing remarks.
Okay, thank you very much, Theresa. When I saw the title of this particular section, I honestly thought that we would have something very different. I've loved this hour, and I want to thank you, but I thought there would be, at least when we talk about water and racism, is how so many of the polluting industries have been built and continue to be built in low-income, often communities of color, which I consider one of the major acts of racism by our country and probably by other countries. I just know ours. Frankly, I think I enjoyed this program much more than what I was expecting. So thank you for a lovely time.
Well, thank you. It's my hope that the dumping of waste in communities of color, which is more in line with what you're talking about, Crick, that the dumping of waste will be looked at through the environmental perspective of polluting the water supply by the dumping of hog waste and other waste. North Carolina has a real problem with that. So Kim Poole, if you would take 2 minutes to do our last word.
No problem. Thank you again, Mama Theresa, for allowing us the opportunity to be a part of this Advancing Human Rights panel. I heard Ms. Cricket's statement, and I just want you to know that we believe and understand the art of possibility. We have enough people telling it like it is, and we need more people to tell it like it can be. And that means going into what we call the ancient future. That means going back to our roots and using that to propel us into the design of the future we need. And so the way of water, as a recap, is the methodology for our reparatory justice. We need WILF nationally and internationally to be that watering system, to water the seeds of reparatory justice. Seeds like me, cool beans, like my sister Raisa, the corn, like my sister Jennifer, the squash. We need you to embody the way of water so that we can design a future. We cannot use the system that got us where we are to design the future where we need to go. And if we do not embody the way of water, then just like Oshun, we will lose the sweet water that gives us the life we need, the sustenance. So the ancient future is waiting for us. And Wilf, we are waiting for you to be the watering system we need for reparatory justice. Thank you again.
And Kim Poole, member of the DMV branch, is key to the Advancing Human Rights Committee. And please know we have 4 working groups. And in some way, it's all about the water. Whether you're suffering from mass incarceration, the lack of housing justice, whether you're fighting for your reparations, or whether you are doing whatever it takes to advance human rights. That's important. Ending mass incarceration and the death penalty, housing justice, the UN decade, and reparations. And why am I blanking on the 4th working group? George Friday helped me out in my senior moment. Thank you. We invite you to participate.
Border and migration justice.
Border, how could I forget that? That is about water. Border, migration, justice. Thank you so much, Tina. You are amazing. Love you so much for how you made this happen. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you, Theresa. Thank you to the entire panel. I'm speechless, so I'm going to say, Lucille, gear up our next ad, so we'll be right on time at 4. Thank you. Yes.
Hello. If you're enjoying Wilf's Congress and the chance to connect with like-minded allies, realize that offering innovative programming like this Congress is only made possible with your support. Consider leaving Wilf a tip. Please go to www.wilfus.org and click the donate button. Choose a one-time or even better, a recurring monthly donation. We suggest a recurring donation of $10 a month to honor our upcoming 110th anniversary. Since 1915, now going on our 110th year, we've envisioned and advocated for a transformed world of peace, where justice reigns. We talk, we act, we get things done. So consider putting your money where your heart is, with peace, with justice, with Wilf. I'm Martha Collins with Wilf US Development Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very powerful presentation from the Advancing Human Rights Committee and a message from our Development Committee. Next, we will have the Women, Money and Democracy Issue Committee that will talk about the financialization of water. And this will be led by Rickey Gard Diamond.
Well, I can't tell you, well, I will tell you that I am so glad to be part of this Congress. I'm really honored, and I apologize if some of the things that I talk about are repetitive, but then that's because I think we're discovering like-minded ways of thinking. And so that's partly what I want to talk about and join you with an economy of our own. It's a educational nonprofit, a feminist alliance of writers and activists, and also I'm a member of the WILP's Women, Money and Democracy Committee, which is, along with WILP, AEOO's most stalwart supporter. I'm grateful to Peace and Freedom's editor, Wendy McDowell, for the space she's given An Economy of Our Own in your pages, and to Dee Murphy and Nancy Price and Lucille Eckridge and Mary Beth Gardam, and certainly to the wonderful women who've been speaking this afternoon. I'm so glad to meet Maureen and Kim Poole, and you'll be able to see soon that we're kind of thinking along the same lines. So I'm going to be talking about financialization and what I am calling women's waterways too, because when I thought about, if you could begin the slideshow at this point, please. Yeah, women's waterways and financialization. Next slide. I couldn't help but think about things similar to what Kim and others were saying, that women and water have long been associated together. We all know that water is soft, fluid, and yielding. Can you click the next line? No? Can you? There we are. But water will wear away. Oops, what's happening? Hello? Oh,
that we'll just try again. I won't go in slides mode.
Digital life is so wonderful when it works, which it does sometimes. All right. So, what are women's waterways? No, Lucille. Please, can you back up?
Yes.
Thank you.
Ay.
You're getting a preview.
Got to get out of slideshow mode. That was the problem.
Deep breaths, everyone.
Thanks, Lucille. We love all your work. It's going great.
No kidding. What a marathon all you tech people have been running. Okay, so water is soft, fluid, and yielding, but water will wear away the hardest rock. This is from a Tao poem by Lao Tzu, who wrote this 2,500 years ago, but these goddesses are much older, and I couldn't help think of how long women and water have been associated for the reasons that you've already heard about. Their amniotic fluids, then amniotic ocean inside us, our flowing menstrual blood, and our tears, perhaps, because we are soft, fluid, and yielding. But we've been celebrated around the world. I'm going to go from the left to clockwise. You see, this is Saraswati, with a Vedic goddess of rivers and speech, art, and learning. You can see she's got a river next to her, and she has a lute. And she's also got several arms, which is always handy for goddesses because we need that. Next to her is the Caribbean indigenous Taino people who associated rivers and fertility. Next to her over here is Serona, a Celtic goddess of springs from central Gaul, which is now France, similar to Brigid in Ireland. Over here is Yamoya, I believe is how you pronounce this, a major water spirit from the Yoruba religion in Africa. Down here below her is the Slavic willies, beautiful water nymphs who danced at night, but who also might just drown you if you didn't please them. The reason we say, oh, that gives me the willies, that's who we're talking about. Over here is Japan's Benzaiten, called, I love this, goddess of all that flows, goddess of music, art, language, water, riding a dragon. And she's very curvaceous, this dragon, very good omen in Japan's culture. Next to this one is Thetis, who was Gaia's granddaughter and a very, very early Greek goddess of the sea before Poseidon even. really early on. And finally, over here is a modern rendition of Mama Watum, a water spirit venerated in West Central and South Africa. And I'm glad to have learned about Mama Adai and Ocean, which is new to me, but there you go. I bet we could discover a lot more of them if we kept on looking. So next slide, please. So what are women's waterways? Well, the patriarchy, if you click just once, Lucia, oops, have called us weak. No, that's okay. These are animated slides, so maybe it's not working with yours. The patriarchy has considered women's waterways weak, watery, diluted, or even deluded, if you remember the Mad Woman in the Attic in the Bronte novels. On the left, you'll see stages of moral development, which is, you know, a result of civilizations, so-called civilizations, academic traditions, like its justice system, which was created by men who put their swords away to conduct verbal warring to prove who's the smartest and who's the winner. It has also been a very hierarchical system, and stages of moral development is no different. On the left is an image of the late 60s Harvard professor Lawrence Kohlberg's theory of moral development. You can think of these colorful pyramids as rocks because they're hard and rigid, because Kohlberg's forefathers in psychology were Freud, Erikson, and Piaget, who all claimed that women were somehow deficient. They had different ways, but they all came to the same conclusion that somehow, that's why you can see at the bottom of that pyramid, there are two girls. They're interested in self-interest and avoiding punishment, which is the pre-conventional morality. But that's as far as Kohlberg thought they went. If you wanted to go on to the next level of conventional morality, you needed a good boy attitude and law and order. And you'll notice these are guys here. And then at the very top, oh, it's a white guy. What do you know? It's post-conventional moral reasoning based on personal ethics, which are based on a awareness of a social contract and principle, but it's very, very individualistic. And you can see that this one has stars above his head, and who knows, he might become a judge someday. But Kohlberg had a small problem. It wasn't really a problem. He had an assistant because by then, by late 60s, women were being admitted to Harvard, even as assistant professors. And he had an assistant named Carol Gilligan. And she was published in 1982 with a theory that said their male-centered research was biased. Her research revealed that women's concerns about relationships and how their decisions will affect other people really showed another way of thinking about moral development. She used abortion as one example of difficult moral decisions that women needed to make all of the time. Gilligan didn't claim to be right. She argued for a combination of both of these gendered roots to ethics, arguing for inclusion, a widening of the lens, and a more complex view. She said the ethics of care, including the morality of nonviolence, could be and was taken by men as well, and a combination of the two was needed for a more hopeful future. Next slide. So those were new springs, and they created wider channels. 4 years later, another important academic book challenged patriarchy's rocky thinking about an even wonkier subject, epistemology, the study of how we know what we know. Here again, patriarchal tradition held that women's voice and intellect was too weak, her femininity too insufficient for hard things like leadership or public office. Women's ways of knowing, to my mind, was similar to Gilligan's book in that it's not arguing pointed hard rock theories, but instead researching new springs of evidence that widen the subject like a river. Mary Belinkie et al. Held that women's development of identity, voice, and intellect came from many contexts outside the formal education system. And in fact, the education system was sometimes predatory or very conflicted for young women. Their research mapped 5 stages of learning, which we use in an economy of our own, and which, again, need not be limited to females. These hold true for all genders as well. The first stage is silent. We start out hoping not to be noticed and feeling dumb and not able to speak. We move on to receiving knowledge from voices that others say are in authority and should know what they're talking about. Then we move on to subjective knowledge. We begin to listen to our own inner voice. And at this stage, we can be kind of fearful about it and protective. But ideally, we'll move on to procedural knowledge, which is their name for when we begin to respect differences, interested in not only those differences, but how those perspectives are formed. We ask questions, and we find some truths more reliable than others. And finally arrive at constructed knowledge, which we've seen lots of today. And throughout this whole conference, we can see that all knowledge is built, not born, and we trust ourselves to collaborate with others, holding and remodeling our ideas with passion and pleasure. Now, fear and pleasure, which are feelings, were very significant to this feminist waterway of fully human thinking. Okay, next slide. Thank you. 2 years later, on the left, Marilyn Waring wrote what is considered the founding document of feminist economics. Waring was one of the first women elected to New Zealand's parliament in 1975. She sat on the budget committee, and so she learned and explained in this book how the UN's system of national accounts creates statistics used by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, focused only on moneyed markets of production and consumption. These accounts made the essential work of women and nature and anyone caring invisible, sustaining enslavement of both women and nature. Trees and mothers did not count in this system until they were cut down or they got a paid job. If you took care of your own children, that didn't count. If you went and took care, if you were a woman of color and went to take care of white children and got paid for it, then that actually added to the account. But what a crazy idea. Whenever I'd talk about this UN systems of accounts, my friends' eyes would just kind of glaze over. So decades later, I think it was 2018, I wrote my personal economic story and what I'd learned the hard way. I coined a new word, screwnomics, for the unspoken but widely applied economic theory that women should always work for less or even better for free. So She Writes Press was my publisher, and they offered me the cover that you see there in the middle, Screwnomics, how our economy works against women and what we can do to make real and lasting change. But I said, no, not that image, not an angry, money-grabbing, libertarian individual. That's not what my research into women's waterways and solutions had showed. We wanted community, we wanted connection, and our revolution danced. That curve in the dancing paper dolls was important to me, and now I understand better why. Okay, so next, let's look at what is financialization exactly? Well, it is the last stronghold of the patriarchy, I think. A growing realm that educated young women are joining, climbing those rocky, sharp angled graphs that look like mountain ranges or arrows pointing upward to more, always more. There's no room for nuance or curves here for rivers, and surely not for feelings. True enough, the finance sector of the economy has grown enormously. Harvard Business School says in 1950 it was 2.8% of the economy. By 1980, it had doubled to 4.9%. By 2006, it was 8.3%. Keeps on doubling. The World Bank now reports on 189 countries where the financial services sector now stands, according to them, at about 20 to 25% of the economy. Financial services, its fees and interest charges, its armies of CPAs and attorneys that are minimizing wages and their taxes impose growing overhead costs on the productive economy, where real goods to meet real needs create real concrete value. It's where most of us still live and earn our livelihoods. Next slide, please. So this is one of the cartoons from Schoonomics, an antagonist named Blaise Bernays, because most of the billionaires of the world are light-skinned, Ivy League educated men with privilege and often starting out with family riches. I said that more young women were joining the ranks of Wall Street, becoming tax attorneys or investment bankers, but the system still requires they adopt economansplaining ways rooted in the individual's rights, the traditions of male justice, and steep, rocky mountains of hierarchy. Money still talks in a male voice. Now, sometimes you may have family members who are working in this realm. You may have, a son you're proud of and he's doing well. And I ask myself, am I being unfair, painting huge swaths of racialized, genderized realms? Next slide. I don't think so. There's a reason that we have traditionally referred to Mother Earth, never Father Earth. And as another scholar, Susan Griffin, said in Woman and Nature, the Roaring Inside Her, if you click again, will you see the, there it is, yes. Woman and Nature, the Roaring Inside Her. Patriarchs viewed the earth and all her connective intelligence as his property, put there for his use. If you want to read a book that will make you angry and roaring, if that gets you going, this is a great book to read. So next, I had the privilege of interviewing Vandana Shiva about her 2018 book, Oneness versus the 1%. In it, she confronts the conflict we have between the natural world and this new virtual digital world. Shiva told me that she counts herself lucky because she grew up in India, where traditions taught her that the mind is not separate from the body, or humans separate from nature. European intellectuals of the 17th century, like Sir Francis Bacon, still considered in schools today as the father of science, built an architecture of patriarchal ideas to rationalize human separation and a hard-heartedness called objectivity. Shiva quotes Bacon's urging scientific pursuit of the secrets, quote, laid up in the womb of nature. And then he went on to say, bind her to your service and make her your slave. Nature must be take by the forelock, grab her by her hair. It is necessary to subdue her, to shake her to her foundations. Kind of shocking. Makes you glad. No, back up again, Lucille. Makes you kind of glad that we have female scientists now that hopefully are thinking differently about nature. Shiva exposes this so-called green revolution that attempts to own and patent nature. She calls its shareholders the toxic cartel. Okay, next. Thank you. So I quoted her in my column at Ms. called Women Unscrewing Screwnomics. And in it, she said, we know from the best science today that all life is intelligent. If microbes were not intelligent, we wouldn't have antibodies or pandemics, I might add. If plants and insects were not intelligent, we wouldn't have Roundup-resistant superweeds and superbugs. Life always evolves and adapts, the very essence of intelligence. An abundance of surveillance and digital data is not intelligence. There is a conflict between living cells, intelligent self-organizing, its adaptive flexibility, and the rigid money power dominating today's virtual world and global corporations. Next, please. Okay, this is from McKinsey. McKinsey is a trusted brand for a different audience than ours. Their intelligence is created for big business and moneymakers. And here's the headline of their article: Nature markets make up $9.8 trillion in goods and services. And then they have this nice illustration to kind of help clarify things. They say this bright blue, nature and the economy is 100% dependent on nature, but not all of nature's value is recognized in economic activity. Okay. Next light blue one says price nature. Some of nature is priced in the economy via policies of the government and markets where money is exchanged. Then they have another blue circle. Nature markets are where nature-specific revenues are generated as an integral part of the trade. The trade? What trade exactly? They're not very clear about that. And then they make this admission, that black hole there is nature positive and equitable nature markets. And then they admit some, but not all nature markets are currently designed to achieve nature positive and equitable outcomes. I don't know, I hear a little bit of econo-mansplaining going on here, but I do want to go on and explain to you the 4 markets that they identified, because they said that they wanted to define and improve understanding of what nature markets are. But I'll bet that most Americans mid 2024, this report was in late 2022, I'll bet most Americans have yet to understand nature markets, and more than likely, you haven't even heard of McKinsey's 4 new nature markets. Okay, so we'll go on next to explain in greater detail. Oh, but first, let's have a cartoon intermission. This is from the Green Finance Observatory that Nancy Price introduced me to. I love these people because I have cartoons in Screwnomics too. They tell you so much. The guy at the top there is saying, how can we mitigate this? And the woman who's hanging on for dear life says, how can I protect my family from this? And the guy at the bottom, who probably is with McKinsey, says, how can I make money off this? If you're feeling like that cat, just, wondering where to land, just remember, cats are intelligent and have a wonderful way of landing on their feet. Okay, next page, please. So what are these new nature markets? Well, McKinsey says there are intrinsic markets where provisioning, regulating, or cultural ecosystem services are trading, including commodity markets. That's where, those have been around for a while. That's where everything like pork bellies or cornmeal is traded. It's productive economic goods. Then the second one is these credit markets. One of them you heard Osprey describe, these carbon credits, and then also new biodiversity credits in response to climate or nature-related policies. Then we have down below that asset markets, where ecosystem assets and resulting services are traded. These require enforceable property rights and meets demand for stable and long-lived value streams. Value streams, what are those exactly? And then the fourth important market are derivative markets. These are private contracts derived from and reflecting the value of ecosystem services of assets or property. Now, if derivatives don't make any sense to you, I don't blame you a bit. I just wrote my latest article at Ms. was about derivatives if you want to learn more. But briefly spoken, they are very complex financial tools called options, futures, swaps, and forwards, a kind of unregulated insurance that billionaires like a whole lot. Okay, next slide, please. All right, this is what we must try to avoid. Mother Jones illustrated a story about Mackenzie Funk, a writer who wrote Windfall, the Booming Business of Global Warming. Mr. Funk was given a refrigerated bottle of Poland Springs water for his interview at the offices of the world's first water-focused hedge fund in San Diego. Without imported water, San Diego's 2.7 million people couldn't live there. So a guy named John Dickerson began Summit Global Management's first water hedge fund in 2005 by picking stocks within the $400 billion hydrocommerce sector, the business of storing, treating, and delivering water for households, manufacturing, and agriculture. But he also wanted real don't move yet. He also wanted real wet water. So, yeah, I need some too. So in 2008, he opened a second hedge fund, the Summit Water Development Group, buying up water rights to billions of gallons of water in Australia and the American West. And some people don't like it, Dickerson conceded to McKinsey as he was leaving, but he said, this is what's coming. And sure enough, it did come. In late 2020, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange launched the first water futures derivative in a California water index market to allow financial speculators to literally gamble on the price of water. These are more paper markets, like the paper markets McKinsey was talking about. Next one, please. Pedro Arroyo Aguda, special reporter at the UN on human rights for safe drinking water and sanitation, who I believe was a speaker here at the conference, said, I am very concerned that water is now being treated as gold, oil, and other commodities that are traded on Wall Street futures markets. Now, futures, just for your understanding, are one of the oldest markets that farmers use for agricultural commodities markets. Commodities markets, if you remember, are what McKinsey Incorporated called intrinsic markets. Now, language matters, and that word intrinsic means natural. Though let's remember, no market is natural or intrinsic, but is created by people, traditionally male people, buying and selling goods, or in today's capitalist casino, betting with paper on prices and interest rates and indexes. These are private contracts, so complicated. No one can understand them all, and few have even heard of them or imagined such things. Here's more of what Mr. Arroyo Aguda reported. Water belongs to everyone and is a public good. It is closely tied to all of our lives and livelihoods, and it is an essential component to public health, as we've just been hearing in the last great presentation. Water is already under extreme threat from a growing population, increasing demands, and grave pollution from agriculture and mining in the context of worsening impact of climate change. In other words, he's saying all of nature's resources needed for life are part of a shared planet, a shared commons, a word we've heard earlier today too. So you probably are in agreement with him. So let's go to the next slide. In 1968, Garrett Hardin wrote a famous paper, The Tragedy of the Commons, when short-term self-interest leads to tragedy for all. And he was really writing about overpopulation. See, the problem with people is that they multiply, while our planet can only add or subtract resources and has real limits. So short-term individual urges to take as much of a resource as possible undermine the larger social good, he said. A little group called Sketchplanations, who drew this diagram, pictures it this way. If you look at this, it's water belongs to anyone, so I take as much as I want, says this guy with a big house, two guys with big houses. And then over here, this little guy with his little tiny house says, seems there's less and less these days. Yeah. But that ratio shown here, 2 to 1, oh, it's false. We are way more out of balance than that. We see blue water at the bottom of the reservoir there. But if we colored this blue green, as in money, it pictures the growing inequality that we hear about all the time. I recently heard a financial writer say that if wages had kept pace with real U.S. productivity, the minimum wage would now be $23 an hour. Instead, Business Insider tells us that Jeff Bezos makes $4 million an hour. That's what we've got. Billionaire numbers are becoming trillions, numbers so outsized and inflated, we should bring back an old term once widely used in finance. In 1920, just before the crashing tragedy of the commons called the Great Depression, international banker Paul Warburg warned, "The world lives in a fool's paradise based upon fictitious wealth, trashy promises, and mad illusions. We must beware of booms based on false prosperity, which has its roots in inflated credits and prices." Financialization in itself, that 20 to 25% of the economy these days, creates nothing of value, only overhead, only real rental costs imposed on the productive, real living economy. And here's the thing, the money that you need and use is no more intrinsic than nature markets are. The billions and trillions of private equity and hedge fund derivatives claimed today can more accurately be called what Warburg called it, fictitious capital. I hope that you're going to stay tuned to learn more from Mary Sanderson and Fernanda Lugo, who are up next on the schedule with some real just solutions. Okay, so where are women's waterways in all of this? You've seen them at work already here at WILF and its Congress, the wonderful Mary Grant of Food and Water Watch, WILF's own Marguerite Edelman, PIFA's detective, Osprey Oriole Lake, of WeCan, Women's Earth and Climate Action Network, and Pedro Arroyo Aguda with the UN. They all urge and lead local small initiatives. As you probably already learned, Senator Elizabeth Warren and Representative Ro Khanna have reintroduced their bill, the Future of Water Act, this year, that would end water futures, another paper derivative. That bill was prompted by a private sale to Greenstone Resource Partners, backed by global investors, of 2,000 acre-feet of water tied to 500 acres of agricultural land, water now shipped to a suburb 200 miles away. This happened in the middle of a drought without environmental review. Experts warn that this will become more common as towns seek scarce water. The Future of Water Act is backed by more than 275 advocacy groups like the Sunrise Movement and Food and Water Watch and WILF, I hope, collaborating together, all of us, to protect water and life. So finally, next slide, please. Thank you. Let me end with the first woman to ever be awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2009. And like you and me, she didn't have a degree in economics. The magnificent Elinor Ostrom, a political scientist who's no longer with us, I'm afraid. But what was her research? Well, she wanted to look into governing the commons, the evolution of institutions for collective action. And I can't help but notice that this latest edition of her book has these wonderful multicolored paper dolls, like Screwnomics, only now, as you can see, women will wear pants when it's called for. Give us the trousers. Next up, please. These are the 8 principles that she discovered, and these were for management of the commons, like shared water or shared pasture, really with an old history and from all over the world. She said it wasn't a tragedy, but a possibility, another new spring of thinking. She widened the river a little bit. She researched what had worked and was working, and she documented methods that enabled self-governance of common resources. I can't, so those principles, 8 principles, are here in the briefest possible form. Define clear boundaries. Know who you are. Know where your edges are. Secondly, match rules to local needs. One size fits all is not going to work. That's the method the globalization people want to impose on us. But we have local needs. We need local rules. Ensure that participants can modify the rules because, as we've already learned, intelligent life is going to evolve, it's going to adapt, so it needs to be flexible. We need to, 4, make sure outside authorities respect community rulemaking, and we've gotten some good ideas today for how to raise a ruckus and make sure those authorities respect that community rulemaking. 5, develop a system for monitoring member behavior. That's another way of saying stay in touch with people. And then 6, use levels of recognition and also sanctions for violators. Use praise and shame and even ostracism. 7, this is important, develop easy, low-cost dispute resolution. You shouldn't have to get an expensive lawyer and have years of law disputes. You need low-cost dispute resolution that you can resort to quickly. And 8, use not hierarchy, but nested tiers like fractals for building responsibility for interconnected governing. Next slide, please. Fractals are nature's method of growth. And nested tiers is an important feminist idea. If you remember, Mackenzie nested its image of nature markets within the larger priced markets, a sign that the powerful are paying attention to us, even if they are camouflaging their true colors. Trust, the basis for any successful enterprise, is at the center of her principles. The good news that such resource governance can grow, be learned, and maintained. I'll just add here that these methods are pretty much the opposite of those imposed by global capital and its financialization and digitization of everything. So this slide says waterways to create a commons. This picture is in recognition of SEWA, the Self-Employed Women's Association of India, whose founder, Ela Bhatt, said, "We are poor, but we are so many." That is our advantage, isn't it? Pictured here is a banyan tree. As their self-employed union expanded, SEWA women didn't imagine their organizing as a built of stone pyramid hierarchy with a president, CEO, or pharaoh up at the top, but as a living banyan tree with millions of leaves, each at work producing life, connecting big, deep roots and growing branches, and drawing these aerial roots to form new connections to the earth. Now, banyans need moisture to be established, but once they're established, they are very resilient. So resilient, they're even said to walk, pursuing water over time with those new trunks they grow. Living proof that all life is intelligent and moving. And so, my friends, are all of you. The reason I can still hold on to hope. Thank you all for Wilf and for coming to listen to me today and for spending the day together, finding common thinking. We still have some time, I think, for comments or questions. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you so much. This was beautiful, super beautiful. This is Robin speaking.
Mm-hmm. And yes, you do have time for questions. So as usual, just use your raise hand feature and there's Randy.
And here I am. So we've been working on trying to get a public banking system together. There's a piece of legislation that was passed in California to do just that same thing. What's the possibility that we could do it nationally and have a public banking system? And are credit unions part of that public banking system? Because I'm a member of a credit union.
Credit unions are terrific, but they're not actually public banks in the way that North Dakota's public bank and California's public bank will be. Public banks literally mean we, the public, own them, and it's our state's revenues that are capitalizing the bank. With credit unions, it's members' capital and investors who are financializing the bank. So it's a little bit different, but it's still a heck of a lot more humane and community-based and local than Wells Fargo or Citibank or Bank of America or Chase Manhattan. I forget, they've merged so many banks together that I'm not sure I've got them all in the right order, but public banks are a very hopeful phenomenon, and there is organizing going on all over the country. We have a little bit of it happening here in Vermont, and New York.
Public banks are they are charged to act only in the public interest. Credit unions are not.
Yeah.
So that's a really important distinction. Wilf's Women, Money, and Democracy Committee has developed a public banking toolkit. I'll put the link to it in the chat. We would love to do some, get that out to folks to help them do some local organizing and begin a conversation about public banking, normalizing the idea of public banking.
And yes, there is some conversation about making it a national infrastructure bank, for instance, to help with some of the water issues that we're talking about.
Veronica, can you unmute?
I was wondering if you had any information through our government's former enforcement of our drainage laws and our Clean Water Act's anti-degradation laws. My son's equations were used to enforce those laws and educate people on our drainage laws. And unfortunately, since 2010, at least the state of Iowa's DNR got on in the radio address from Leopold saying that his non-enforcement of the Clean Water Act and Iowa's 16 drainage laws had not affected the health of any Iowan. Unfortunately, glyphosate is now testing positive, supposedly, in 50% of the male sperm in the US. Our birth rates have gone down. Miscarriage rates are far higher than our abortion rates. And yet we are following the lead of our, I'd say the mega Republicans who do not even do their duty. We have no farm bill. It's supposed to be redone every 5 years. The Farm Bill is where we get our funding for the SNAP program, for the school lunch programs. Thanks. 40% of our feeding of our children through those programs and the WIC program comes from our Farm Bill. And also money for all these conservation practices that we need to prevent point source pollution. Conservation is so important to saving our natural resources of our soils, uncontaminated soils.
Thanks, Veronica. We have a lineup of questions.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with everything you've said. Yeah.
Go ahead, Lois. I think you're next.
Hi. I'm unmuted. Yeah.
Hello.
Okay. In the New York Times today, one of the lead articles was FDA questions ecstasy as a PTSD treatment. FDA questions ecstasy as a PTSD treatment. Wish they'd been sitting in the audience on this program. Outstanding presentations. I would also like to note the UN UNCTAD, they call it UNCTAD. That is like a fraternity of corporate power. And if we keep an eye on what they're doing, that will help us monitor some of these powers at the high level. I think that you have a program here that is extraordinary. And this is my first time in a U.S. World Congress. And I'm amazed at the talent, expertise, and experience among all you women. I am honored to be with you. One last point. You mentioned the Special Rapporteur on Water. Indeed, he was with us yesterday in a video. And he cares about what we're doing. Now, that's why it was important to have that video. It's rare. But he went before that to Indonesia, and there he was harassed and not able to enter the water conference. And so I think that shows that even he is up against this kind of pressure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Alan, we're running up a time crunch. Can you make a quick question?
Yeah, well, I'm very glad that you mentioned the Commons and the incredible work of Eleanor Ostrom. The Commons seems, and I've mentioned this also in other contexts here, really the integrating question of what it is that we are struggling to reclaim. And in the foundation of this country, the founding fathers said the purpose of the Constitution of the United States of America is to privatize the commons. That's the system we've been working under. And Thomas Jefferson said, and the way to do that is divide the land up into little squares and put a price on every one. And that's the system we are dealing with, that what are the resources of the people have been privatized and putting into the money system rather than the human relation system, the way the commons is dealt with by the indigenous people all over the world, here in Palestine and everywhere in the world. Reclaiming the commons is very glad that you put that forward, or the founding thought at the end of this presentation.
Thank you, Ellen. I was thinking of you when I saw her reference that. All right, Sue Ann, you take us on with our last question.
Thank you. And thank you at first for that incredible presentation. It was so, excuse me, all of a sudden I got a message that wasn't supposed to be there. But I noticed that you never mentioned militarism and also the fossil fuel industry and the war industry, which a lot of people say are actually driving the economy. And the militarism, the money that we're spending on that, which we heard from Tim Wallace, this morning to convert the money we're spending on nuclear power and nuclear, all the nuclear things, weapons and plants, to be.
Thanks, Joanne. Let's let her reply because we're down to the last minute.
To be converted to use peace and climate uses.
You're right. The military industrial complex is a big part of how billionaires get rich, and how local communities kind of get sucked into it too, because it represents a lot of jobs. So that nuclear to windmills is a wonderful approach to that. We need to begin thinking about our survival. I write about military issues often at Ms. And I heard many people talking about it, so I was just trying to cast a light on these new tools that they keep dreaming up ways to come up with sham ways to keep on doing just exactly what they're doing now.
Agreed. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll let Dee introduce the next group, but I'm just going to jump in and say thank you so much, Rickey. Thank you for being here, presenting it. Always love your work. As for those of you who don't know, she sign up at Screwnomics to get the newsletter. And I'm sorry, I'm saying it wrong. What is it?
An economy of our own.
An economy of your own to get the newsletter.
An economy of our own.
An economy of our own. I love your writing.
Thank you.
And in Ms. as well. So thank you. And I'm going to stop so that we can stay on time. Take a break, everybody, to stretch as we welcome our next break. Dee, are you there to welcome?
And also, thank you very much, Rickey. Thank you very much for coming and educating us all and being such an amazing member of the Women, Money, and Democracy Committee. So very encouraging to those of us who are newer, including us, and when we have questions and, educating us on what we're asking. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Next, from the same committee, Women, Money, and Democracy, we will have Mary Sanderson, who will present on Can We Rescue Water from the Financialization, or from Trickery? Can we rescue water from financial trickery? And she has a guest with her who she will introduce, named Fernanda Lugo. Hello. Did I say it wrong? You're smiling.
Fernanda Lugo. Yes.
Apologies. Thank you.
Thank you. Everything's ready for you, Mary. And thank you, Rickey, for that great segue into how it's all connected.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I want to give greetings to everyone from the Women, Money, and Democracy Committee, represented today by Fernanda Lugo and me, Mary Sanderson. What an inspiring Congress this has been. Hard things to learn, but I'm hugely grateful for all the activism gathered here and for the organizers' sacrifices to make it happen. I want to especially thank Kim Poole and her sisters. Thanks to Sister Rickey Gard Diamond for linking up the culture of domination and the immorality of finance. Our committee works to understand and address the money problem behind most of our other problems. We study ancient future monies and every effort to create a sane distributive money system. Our committee works to understand, we support public banking, whose vibrant campaigns reveal how money should serve the common good and not favor any powerful elite. Next slide, please. Sadly, the purpose of our current money system is power hoarding. By demanding profit to pay interest, it blocks the flow of loving care and of water to support life. Maureen Taylor couldn't have been more clear this afternoon. It's immoral. Chris Jones told us on Friday, our food production system cannot stop poisoning people and water. In this system, profit is more important than water. Privatizing water horrifies us. It degrades sacred nature into a base commercial commodity. But we shouldn't be surprised. It follows directly, as Rickey spoke to as well, from European aristocrats privatizing land and authorizing private banks to create the nation's money systems by lending. We grandmothers have to ask, does profit really have to be more important than water? Forever? Well, Fernanda and I are here to say no. And no, it's not too complicated to understand. The way money gets created, the way it gets created is the monetary system. I have 5 minutes to use this kind of shocking database, 100 plus experts confirm, to make that one point for my Wilf sisters. We're swimming upstream here, we know. Let's put in the chat the database right now for the first time. New money is bank credit. Wait. The talking heads tell us every day the government prints the money and banks lend from savers. Those are urban myths. Stick with us for a minute and see some excerpts from these experts. Slide. The International Monetary Fund says banks fund new loans by creating new deposit money. In other words, whenever a new loan is made to a customer, the loan is dispersed by creating a new deposit of the same amount as the loan and in the name of the same customer. Okay. Now, the biggest banks create the most money for their own purposes. No one expects private banks to lend for the common good. They first won this privilege to control the money supply for their own advantage in Great Britain in 1694. Now, governments are supposed to support the common good, but governments have to tax citizens to pay interest to banks for the money. It is pretty crazy when you look at it. The database, 100 experts confirm, which is going to be in your chat, lets you verify and process this shocking truth. Slide. Fernanda, will you please read what the Chicago Fed says?
Sure. Loans are made by creating the borrower's account.
Crediting.
By creating additional deposit money. The actual process of money creation takes place primarily in banks. They do not really pay out loans from the money they receive as deposits. If they did, no additional money would be created. Wow.
Okay, I'll just repeat the one key thing there. At the end of the second line, banks do not really pay out loans from the money they receive as deposits. Next slide, please.
Mm-hmm. We'll get the links to that database to work in a minute. I can't copy and paste at the same time that I'm doing this.
Oh, I bet you Lucille can help. Okay. All that we use as money is actually bank credit circulating among us, ticking up interest like a taximeter. Bank credit money purposely concentrates wealth. I wish I could point to this right-hand box, how bank credit purposely concentrates wealth and power. One, by controlling who gets the money and for what. War's okay, but protecting water, not so much. And by number two, collecting interest. Those are the ways that banks purposely concentrate about this week all come back around to profit first, money for this, but not for that. Now, let's look again at the question we started with. Does profit
really have to be more important than
like
water? Some technical issues there. Carry on.
It looks like the answer is yes, as long as we are stuck with this particular monetary system. Hopefully not forever. We're going to check only 2 more experts from our fabulous database before Fernanda tells us about an historically proven money that unblocks the flow of money to serve the common good after all. The University of Southampton, the test of booking a bank loan in banking software yields the finding that the credit creation theory of banking alone conforms to the empirical facts, that banks do not lend pre-existing money, and that each bank creates new money when it extends a loan. That's Richard Werner. After the 2008 crash, he tested economists' theories on how money gets created. What we mostly never think about. Did you honestly ever think about how does money get created? No, but we need to. So it is Werner's work which forced many of the official confessions collected in this database. His article is very readable, and we're going to put it in the chat as well. We peace women need to understand that bank credit is the tool that allows a shrinking elite to control information, governments, food, shelter, and even water. Now, your hometown loan officer might argue with that, but it's no surprise to bondholders and hedge fund managers. Slide, please. Old language alert. Hamilton told Congress, every loan which a bank makes is in the first shape a credit given to the borrower on its books, the amount of which it stands ready to pay either in its own notes or in gold or silver at his option. But in a great number of cases, no actual payment is made in either. The borrower, frequently by a check or order, transfers his credit to some other person to whom he has a payment to make, who, in his turn, is often content with a similar credit. And in this manner, the credit keeps circulating, performing in every stage the office of money. He doesn't mention. Keeps circulating, working like money, but accruing interest constantly to the bank the whole while. Private banks, no, I want to say this something else. So there's nothing new about banks creating the money. Alexander Hamilton was important because as first U.S. Secretary of Treasury, he set up the first privately owned United States central bank to profit by lending to the government. Hamilton had learned the credit creation trick in the usual way by apprenticing with European financiers. Private banks' power to create and distribute new money was the tool that allowed European colonizers to trample and plunder the whole world. Today's financial tricks to monopolize water are today's chapter in the same book. But Fernanda, can't we have a monetary system that supports life and healing?
Yes, we can. Interesting that most of the characters you mentioned here were men to support Rickey's story. I learned so much about how banks do this story of debt money creation and all of the consequences that sprout up from this. So this is an image from our campaign with the Monetary Alliance. There is money creation as credit with interest, and this causes so many consequences, but the root cause is so glaringly big that it's even hard to identify. So another problem with this money creation this way is that this money is created, as Mary said, as credit with interest. And it includes something called the growth imperative. So because creditors demand back money that was never created in the first place, these banks ultimately have the power tool to keep sucking off of the economy. How does this work? As debt, it demands expansion before transaction. Banks give out loans, but they demand, they create a debt to put into both their liabilities and their assets and expect to be paid back not only the principal, the original amount lent, but also the interest. So before they even make a deal, they have that mindset, not reciprocity, but give me something back before I even engage in a relationship with you. So the alternative solution that the group that we work with, the Women in Democracy group, and also the Alliance for Just Money, we support this great reform, which is just money. So what that means is that money isn't based in debt. It's debt-free. It's just money. It's not a debt-bearing system. But also, very importantly, it's based on the principles of justice and democracy. So as you see in this tree image, what can sprout out of this just money, which is an asset created by we the people for just exchange, helps us to get the money to all the things that we need, to flow to all that we want in our functional society, kind of like how water works. So many things that we need have the need for investment right now, like healthcare and education. And there isn't a medium of exchange to facilitate the creation of these things because we have an inefficient system. With money credit, the way it is now, the unit of exchange is only created for the few, by the few, not for the people. So instead, when money is created by the people, for the people, we can get to the healing future that everybody in this conference has been striving to embody. And our solution is really the legislative how to get there is so much simpler than the NFL draft or organic chemistry. I'm not sure what you guys consider complicated, but it's really simple. So let's end debt money and get just money. So the legislation that we support is actually the result of many money experiments over time, starting way back here with the Pennsylvania script. Ending bank credit money was most recently introduced, however, in 2011. So it's been through a lot of evolution and steps of thinking. Back in the Civil War, we paid with asset money called the greenbacks. These were debt-free currencies as well. And then the Chicago Plan took that idea up and expanded it even further. So the legislation that we have now is kind of a reform of this one, HR 290 that you see on the screen. And it's ready to roll for the new legislative sessions. I introduced to you today the American Monetary Reform Act, rewritten and updated for our modern times and struggles. And it's just 2 simple steps, a really big transition. We need to, step 1, end private banks' power to create money as debt. When they do that, it demands interest and carries that growth imperative. So turning that off and transitioning that over to this green arrow, we can have money that is debt-free, permanent asset of the nation, and it shall be not growth dependent. And that is what we consider monetary reform. We also use the term democratized money and sovereign money, and of course, just money. It's really that simple. So another important point about it is that right now the money that we have is fueling the incredible inequality, and it's really simple to fix it with this reform, because imagine all that we can pay for. With the current bank created money, this is how much money is available for public spending and people. Like we said, there isn't enough to go for education or restoration. So imagine all of this, the healing futures that we are all seeking that is possible with just money. And it does not carry the risk of inflation because we don't have control of how much money is created right now. But if we did, then we can make sure that it goes to the right places. So more about just money. It can be used to pay for so many of our social needs. Monetary reform can get it done, just like this planet superhero guy says. We can use it for universal basic income if we so desire and choose democratically. Education for all, to reparations, the urgently needed climate action, and it can help pay for our infrastructure and healthcare. But a very important extra point of this is that it can pay for these, but it also turns off the tap. It helps us stop the money pipeline to all of these destructive industries, such as fossil fuels. And with just money for the just transition through the AMRA bill, it's possible to facilitate the divestment, making it possible for companies to focus on their social goals instead of just their expansion goals. So even if a company desires to do good, they still have that overarching systemic pressure to pay back the loan that was literally never created. So with this, we can protect and invest on what truly matters here on Earth, our forests, oceans, and our stable climate. So we've been spreading the word about this. We had our first direct action this past May Day, and our movement is growing, and we do so many activities, including book clubs and coffee houses, and our movement is full of songwriters and artists and lecturers, so please join us. Some takeaways that I hope you find useful. I said the DET acronym. DET means that it demands expansion before transaction. Debt is burning us up. It's also, you might have heard this term, the fire sector, which is also literally burning us up with their speculative trading in finance, insurance, and real estate. They provide no real goods or services to the people. It's just kind of trading money back and forth. So this is the money system that's burning us up right now. And instead, thinking of how money can work more similarly to the values we hold dear, a little bit more like water, we can make sure that just money happens and it can support water, such as what it stands for here, wellness before profit. It can be asset-based, not debt-based, sort of like allowance to spend on things that we need. And it's also transactionally appropriate. So there may be multiple forms of currency, and you might be able to use a different kind depending on what's appropriate to purchase. The E stands for that it's earthly. Our just money system lives within the donut economics model. We don't want to go beyond our planetary limits of growth. So that's water-based money. And it's also recyclable. This money doesn't disappear after you pay back a loan. It'll keep circulating and circulating, and it can be permanent and stable, just like the trust that we have in each other. So redesigning our economic system is an essential solution, and monetary tools are an essential part of that. We also support public banking and local currencies. So join the fight to redesign how money works for people and the planet and for economic justice. And that is our conversation today. Thank you. And this is I'll put this link in the chat too, of the collaborative mural that I wanted to put in here because it represents also the wealth is in the water. So this was
Thank you, Fernanda. You rock.
Thank you, Fernanda.
Left 10 minutes for people to respond and ask or tell us something.
Yeah.
Yes, that's what I was just about to announce, Mary. Thank you. So we have about 7 minutes for Q&A, and we see a lot of hand raised. I see in order Veronica Lack, Kim Poole, Mary Beth Gardam, and Laura Dewey. Veronica Lack, hi.
Unmute.
Under Biden's administration, I was able to get a discount for installing solar panels on my home. The federal share came after I installed it, 22 panels, so I produced more than I used. So I then put back into supposedly to Mid-Americans so that they can get discounts and supposedly keep my neighbors' rates down too. But my whole thing is no electric bills. It's like creating money for me. And that's what I like about your program here, Fernanda. This fits in. Biden's infrastructure bill presented ways for us to then use the money to install the panels that I put on, and then also the Tesla battery to store it and stay stable when the weather went bad, and my neighbors could come and use my electricity when theirs was off. But we have to take advantage of these things and understand that then we don't have to pay the electricity bills. We're getting
for you, Veronica.
Yeah,
Good
so
for
thank
you.
you, Veronica. I'm sorry, we've only got 5 minutes. I'm sorry to have to cut you short again, but we've got about 7 people with questions in 5 minutes. So Kim Poole is next in line. If we can briefly ask our questions and talk in hyperspeech. Thank you very much.
Sure. First, I just want to acknowledge the singing tree and your mural, wealth in the water. All of that gets me so excited. Thank you for being an example of what we need more of. My question is about the balancing. You mentioned reparations as a part of the Captain Planet approach to the rebalancing of our world and just money. What do you recommend in reparatory justice as we look at that for rebalancing resources, as we in our current state realize that 1% of the population already owns 99% of everything? So what does Just Money recommend for the rebalancing of that resource imbalance?
I'll take it if you want. Thanks for that question. I like seeing your face more than your emblem. Hey, but what we recommend and are all excited about is that if we can get a Congress brave enough and smart enough to do this, and the current system keeps bringing crises, so it could happen. When there is that much democracy to be able to pass this sensible plan, then the frontier is open for everybody to start solving these real problems. Like reparations is not a simple, give me your plan in 1 minute. But there needs to be a big public conversation about how to best do it. So it isn't just like a little payoff or a token. No, but that's a whole conversation that we get to have after we get a sane money system into place. So I recommend watching for the crises. I mean, they're coming, don't worry, there'll be more crises. And when they do, that's the time to educate each other all along the way. Right, so that we can get a brave Congress, a brave and smart enough Congress sometime, like a big change to say, oh yeah, let's do this. It will help us. It will open the door to solving a lot of problems. I'm sorry, Fernanda, go ahead.
Agree. And I also think that it's important for our movement with monetary reform to connect with groups that are struggling on the ground right now and see what their demands are for how we can make this legislation work for all people. And I think that we can write first articles just to spread the word that there is a way to pay for, whenever they say like, oh, we can't pay for reparations or we can't pay for healthcare or climate justice, we need to have that automatic comeback. Like, no, y'all have been making up the money out of thin air for your own private interest for forever. And we know that that's not the only way. So taking back that knowledge and bringing it forth with people power and all of these ideas of where do we want to distribute the money once we have it, once we can make it, and as trust and credit in ourselves and our communities, that is when we can make this an official reform that will be national. And of course, there's local currencies and public banking that can support people along the way. So I really want to write an article about how a just money can pay for reparations. So if that's what you're thinking about, please contact me and we'll get in touch.
Okay, so there are even more hands raised, and I was just
Yeah,
informed that the presentation that we had slated for the 5:30 p.m. session is a video, and it's only a few minutes long. So hopefully if everyone speaks quickly, we'll be able to get a few more questions in and extend it another 5 or 6 minutes.
Let's hear from
the next person whose hand was up is Laura Dooley.
Okay.
Unmute, Laura. Oh.
Hold on. Thank you. Stop unmuting me. Okay. This question is for Fernanda. It seems like this issue. Okay, someone keeps muting me. Can everybody hear me?
You're good now.
Yes.
Okay. Because my computer keeps saying I'm muted. I would think this issue would really resonate with young people. Young people can't afford to buy a house, a car. Tuition is sky high. Tuition used to be free in some locations like California and New York. So how can we talk? What would be a really good approach to talk to young people about this issue? Just money, all the other issues you've talked about.
We got to connect it to all the things. I'm going to wave my pride flag a little bit. It's June and we're happy and connecting all of the issues. And yeah, we're all struggling. There are so many TikToks that are shockingly getting to the point that corporations are just squeezing the profit out of all of our essential needs. Yeah, I've tried to connect it to the youth, and I'm bringing it to my local community in the form of the local environmental activism I do. I include more of this like economics and how are we managing our resources. And that's getting to people. However, well, no, there's no however, we just got to keep doing it. And I think that also including all of these interdisciplinary methods of activism, like the art and the singing, really helps the movement grow. So I'm going to keep doing that. And if you're into that, please join our group where we're going to be doing a lot of that art stuff and collaboration. Thank you. Next question so we can get a roll on.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we have a question from Sue Ann Martinson next.
Yes, I have a question. If you're familiar with the genuine progress indicator.
Yes.
And I see some of the same principles applied because I was talking about that earlier. And instead of using the general product or domestic product indicator, which calls for the expansion. That's the thing. And again, I'm with Women Against Military Madness, so I get at the militarism. And that's part of the problem, that this system is putting all the military expansion on that side, and the whole system sounds exactly what what is described here. It's just given different names, but it is a very important concept to get the expenses out of their turn military expenses into expenses instead of this ever growing expanding. Thank you.
Yes, it's absolutely both. Oh, Mary, you're muted, but I'm going to take a shot and say that it's absolutely both things that make a difference. We do need to change the goal of our economic system, and that is where these indicators of wellness and prosperity come in. But also, like, the major tool that we're using for exchange, if it's a rotten tool that's leading to this inherent need for growth, which it is, like mathematically, it's impossible to not need to pursue growth, which is how money is made. If we don't change the tool, we can't really get rid of all the psychological consequences of that. As I mentioned, when we have debt and it demands expansion before a transaction, it's asking more of you. It doesn't approach you with reciprocity. It approaches you as in, I need to get more out of you than you're going to give. So it's both psychologically, that leads to the masculine viewpoint of take, and wars. And it's so connected. Mary?
I just wanted to say I appreciated Sue's presentation yesterday and the way that you brought in the progress index. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who's next? Oh, Judy.
So Mary Beth is actually
Mary Beth was right
She's
there.
got her hand up.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I just wanted to say that when Mary first brought this monetary reform idea to our committee, the idea that resonated most for me was she asked the question, how much more caring could our people be if they weren't constantly worried about debt, healthcare costs, repaying their debt, just being able to afford their lifestyle, as humble as it might be, if we were able to reform on money. What we might actually be the generous and good-hearted people that we want to be, that we're meant to be. I think that is something that we should all consider as we look at this and try to normalize this conversation in our communities.
Thank you.
Bring it to your community.
Nancy Price, and then Theresa El-Amin and Judy Adams.
Well, I just want to say that I knew after the two of you and Rickey spoke that I would understand money and finance better. In fact, I'm quite inspired that we should have a conversation about how to bring this into the earth democracy and water as a human right, and see about some graphics or images, or how to make that an addition to our campaigns and projects. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Teresa?
And Theresa El-Amin.
Yes. Dear sister from the People's Republic of Madison, Wisconsin. I do love Madison. I think about the Rainbow Bookstore and how radical Madison has been in my life. I've spoken there many times. But I do want to say on the question of reparations, it's not just about a paycheck. It's about a transformation of society and all of the broken promises for centuries, particularly from Reconstruction and the 40 acres and a mule, means we cannot depend exclusively on a legislative strategy, which is why the UN Decade Reparations Working Group urges branches to connect with the movement in your cities, because it's happening everywhere. The whole state of California, Atlanta, Georgia, Evanston, Illinois, Asheville, North Carolina, the reparations movement, and I'm talking reparations. So let's make sure we don't erase people of African descent in this UN decade. Last year of the UN decade for people of African descent, and the UN has said not enough has been done on recognition, justice, and development. So there's a new decade coming. So I would urge Kim Poole to join the Women, Money, and Democracy. Don't wait for them to call you, Kim Poole. Go to their meeting. It's very few Black people who go to their meetings. So be one of the first, Kim Poole. Be one of the first. Go to their meeting and stand up for reparations, because you're an expert on the question of reparations, Kim Poole. So help them out. Help them out.
Please
Thank
do.
you.
Thank you very much, Teresa. And Judy Adams has a question. Apologies for rushing everyone. We're darned if we do, darned if we don't stay on track. So
this is a kind of your patience. This is a kind of specious comment, but what about all our bank accounts and the money that we squirreled away, physical money and bank account? How do all the people who are working with banks get restitution, or, you know,
thanks, Judy. Try to do this in 30 seconds. It is a fine question. I'll tell you what, the legislation that we recommend has an excellent and not easy to read, a readable transition program. Nobody's bank account will be affected. Your retirement account is more at risk now than it would be with this change. 100% or maybe 300%. Everything financial is at risk right now. There's quite a cliff that we're approaching, even though the newspapers are busy saying, don't worry, be happy. But the transition that we propose is so slick that people who are not paying attention to finance and banking and any of that could not even notice until suddenly things start to feel a little better. But I recommend reading that legislation. It's on the monetaryalliance.org website, and it is readable. And we've had a couple of study sessions where we go over it specifically, and we would be very pleased to do that again. If you'd like to contact us, going over that legislation and getting familiar with exactly what it is we're proposing is a wonderful thing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I want to add that it's very empowering to know that this legislation exists, and also just empowering to know that money is made up. And the science that we presented, that Mary threw in the database for you to look at, really asserts that, and getting more youth to realize and elders to realize that we've been tricked all these years, that will spur the movement of creating our local peace economies, and people will divest from what they're doing right now, corporate jobs, and join the activism, join the local community building. And that's what we're here to spread the word about, the transition that we need.
Please, can you put it in the chat, this legislation you would like us to read?
Yes. I got it going there right now, and I just put the 2-page fact sheet on it there. So save the chat before the meeting ends.
We do have a break scheduled, and we have 4 minutes. I encourage anyone with further questions to please send the messages in chat, and I'm sure that Mary and Fernanda will be very quick to respond to any requests that you have for contact information or any additional questions. Thank you very much. And now our tech committee will play the slated ad and the video from the Raging Grannies of Philadelphia.
I will just say that this was, while she gets it going, this happened on let's see, April 11th. You can start it. I'll talk loud. April 11th, outside of Senator Fetterman's office. How many roads must a man walk down before you call him a man? And how many seas must a white dove sail before she sleeps in the sand? Yes, and how many times must their cannonballs fly before they're forever banned? The answer, my friend, is blowing in